So welcome all. The first piece we're going to look at is kind of universal orchestration, and really to set the scene of where we're trying to go with our universal orchestration and the functionalities we've got around that. And this is where we're trying to change that mindset from, rather than just looking at an RPA environment and saying we need to get the bot efficiency up, so making sure that our robots are working all the time, into more of a business focused approach and making sure that we hit the SLAs of the business 100% of the time. So whilst the efficiency of the technology is important, it's making sure that we achieve the business goals with that technology and really move that forward. And so what we're looking at here is moving to a real technology agnostic platform here, trying to understand that we can work with the widest scope of technologies out there, and aware that whatever technology there is today, 6 months' time, there's going to be a new technology coming out. So trying to make it as adaptable to work with any technology as we can, rather than saying, well, we're going to work with this new tool and just have functionality to integrate with that one tool. Trying to make it as open as possible so that we can work with whatever comes next. Because we're looking at that event-driven orchestration piece and understanding where we fit within that, and being able to be as flexible and adaptable around that. And it's bringing that orchestration that we kind of know and love within the RPA space to everything out there. So being able to have that 24/7 monitoring of the environments, automating those kind of simple fixes for kind of platforms that are out there, and trying to bring those in. So we've got expanding out the APIs and webhook triggers, just to make sure that we can work with as many technologies, be as adaptable as we can be, to try and bring that whole business process, end-to-end business process, rather than saying, let's look through this keyhole and fix this particular issue, then we go and look through another keyhole, trying to be that solution to be able to give you that end-to-end view of that solution, or that process going through the business, and making sure that it hits those business SLAs that we've got there. So really what we're looking at here is the process intelligent piece here, is looking at that aggregated data across all of your technology. So whilst individual pieces of data may say, well, this is what's going on in that particular, again, looking through that particular keyhole, it's having that process intelligence to understand what is there to do, how can we make it better, how can we make it more seamless, more flexible, not held up by a particular bottleneck in the process, but having that flexibility to understand where that process is going. So being able to make that bigger impact across the organization, to make sure that the overall business process hits its SLA, gets those returns that you need for the organization, rather than just being that individual technology's focus point. So it's seeing where your process is good and knowing exactly where to act, to focus on where are those pain points, where can we overall improve this system. And looking at governance here, it's not just about the bots. We're really trying to focus more on the outcomes and understanding what's going on within the technology. So here we are looking at things like, whilst we've always got the role-based access control within C2, is bringing that out to a wider group of people, but being able to say, well, here is a new technology that's coming in, and we're seeing it, I guess, with Power Automate. And I always liken this back to when Excel started having macros. Everyone went crazy for macros, and everyone had to go and lock it down because all these things were being kind of created out there. So C2 is bringing some of that governance into this kind of wider technology space. So we've got the ability there to have that auditing practice, being able to kind of understand what's going on in the environment, and to get a grip of all these kind of disparate technologies doing different things, and making sure that we can give that holistic view of the technologies that are out there. Being able to do those proactive notifications, fixing things, just making people sure and aware of what's going on, as well as things such as the labels and custom fields that we'll look at a bit later today, to be able to bring some of that information into the hands of the people operating it, so they know, information about these processes, rather than just being a complicated name of a task. Actually know who owns it, where's the documentation, when was it first uploaded, when's the date for review, to kind of analyze this to make sure if there's a constant improvement process to be taken away. So we're looking at lots of things there about that wider scope of governance, and making sure that we're able to document easily and simply the information about the processes, and whether they be an RPA process or a business process spanning multiple technologies, to be able to kind of document that, making it clearer for everyone doing what they need to do to have a smooth delivery of those processes. I just want to take a second to explain the early access to some people who may not have come across that. So late last year within C2, we've basically enabled the ability to switch on and switch off the new functions as we bring them into the tool. So within the settings, you can actually go there and say, do you want to have these early access features? So maybe the first 2 or 3 iterations you're happy to have in your non-production environments, but you don't want to enable them in your production environments until you're truly happy with the way the functionality works. So anything that's marked with early access here is actually switchable, so you can actually turn it off in an environment if you wish to. Really to give that flexibility and control of your production environment so that you don't have to have that new functionality there with your team members who may or may not be trained on the platform or the new features we've got here. But let's just jump into the optimizations piece. Now, one of the things that C2 has already focused on is that efficiencies and improving the overall throughput of your automation. So trying to improve the number of automations that go through first time. So avoiding system exceptions, business exceptions, whatever they might be, to try and get work done. So some of these things here are really there to improve that first time automated targets. So some of the examples we've got here with these tiles here is we've got a processes without stop request functionality. So this means it's a process that once started, it'll run to the end. Because you haven't got the stop feature within your actual process itself, C2 can't stop it. So if there's a higher priority task, it can't get that task to stop and yield to something that's going on that maybe have a higher priority that you'd like to step in. Queue-based processes, so C2 knows if a queue is being used, but you're not using a queue trigger. So the ability of C2 to scale up and scale down the number of machines working on those automations is gone if you're not using those queue-based triggers. So this is a real way of driving efficiency in the environment, of getting the work done as soon as possible and freeing up the environment to go and do other work. So when new work comes in or future peaks come in, the machines aren't still tied up doing an old job because it's one machine working on it. It's really there to try and increase that throughput and get things done as fast as possible. And things like empty resource groups. So more of a hygiene thing here. Understand you've got a resource group that's got nothing into it. And if people happen to select that for their task, it's not going to do any work because there's nothing there. But I was going to jump into one of these and show you a little bit more about these. So at the top, we've got some information about the impact. So this tells you what is the impact, why it's been recommended as something you want to review, why you might want to do something about it. So here it kind of just goes through what that information is, why you should consider it, and really spend a few minutes looking at the items to do. Now we've got beneath it, we've got the items that we've got here that C2 has raised as these are processes we've got in the environment that we might want to look at. We can see it's not been reviewed. And then our 3 buttons on the right, we can go into here, or we can say, we want the details of this. We can go in and we can say, well, actually, we want to ignore it because we don't care at all about this one. If we do the ignore, we have the opportunity to say, well, I want to ignore it for now. I'll come back to this. So I can either say I want it to be temporary, and I'll come back to this next month. I can put in a reason or a comment for that one, so you can defer things and come back to it later if you want to. Or you can decide I'm going to ignore this permanently because whilst it would improve things, I don't care. It's, I want to make sure that this process constantly runs this way. I never wanted to stop. Therefore, let's ignore it and we'll just put it away. So you haven't got that noise of the things that are always going to be there saying, let's do this. Or lastly, you can actually go into this and go, take me to the process. Let's go to the actual process itself, the task here, and let's go and make those changes, see what the information is. We might want to do something about it. We can also see, these are the items here that we've already reviewed. So we've resolved these ones, or it would say ignored if we'd ignored them. And also down the bottom here, we've got possible ways to solve this. So some information about what you might want to do to improve this. And depending on the tile that you've got, you'll have different information about this, about how to solve these, what you might want to do to kind of resolve it. or even actually ways within the C2 where you may actually want to go and say, well, let's go and change the trigger for this one. We can do it here. Now, at the moment, we've got about 3 or 4 of these tiles. We are constantly working on these now to kind of bring out new tiles every time we have a release. So the idea is we're going to expand these and improve them and have a wider variety of these tiles. So again, if you've got ideas about things that you think would help to optimize your environment, or things that you've done in the past that you'd like to see here that you could automatically have C2 gather for you, rather than you having to go through process by process trying to capture that information, we'd love to hear from you on those ones. And I say we are going to expand out on these ones, looking at now what are the big things that help people to improve that efficiency of the environment and improve that automation throughput of the automation space. We've got our labels and properties. So here we've got labels, and we can create as many labels as we want to. So really it's just putting in a name and a description, and you can give it a color. You can see we've created a few labels here. So we've created a label here for business critical. We've created one for some applications, so Salesforce, SAP, and ServiceNow. And then we can see the tasks, resources, or workflows that we've assigned them to. So we can quickly jump out and say, well, I want business critical task. I just want to jump out to this task and see what it is. So I can then go out and see this and see my business critical label that I've got there. And I can jump down and I can give multiple labels to the same thing. So you can have as many labels as you want to for those ones. So it's just a very quick way of being able to say, right, I'm going to group together all of my Salesforce tasks, or all of my business critical tasks, or whatever it might be. Where we're looking to take this is to do much more with these labels. So rather than it being a way of grouping them and being able to jump to them quickly, being able to do things like plan downtimes. So you know that, let's say, you might have tagged every process that works with email, and your email server or systems aren't working, so you want to stop, rather than building up all those business exceptions that then someone is going to go through manually one by one, checking or rerunning or doing whatever it has to. You can actually say, let's just put all of those in a planned downtime until we get our email system back up, and then we can end it. So where we're looking to take these labels is to bring much more functionality in around that, as well as looking at within dashboards and reporting, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is being able to do a little bit more around that. So whereas at the moment you can filter in our dashboards, in the widgets, on workflows, resources, items like that, being able to say, well, actually, I want to get these workflows, and rather than going clicking each individual workflow you want, you can say, well, anything that's got the business critical label or anything that's got the SAP label, I want to get the information for the success rates or whatever it happens to be. So bringing in these labels to kind of have that information there, to define tasks, those resources, to that visibility, and being able to organize and see more things that are out in the environment. If I move on to custom fields, so custom fields are also available now, again, linked to the workflows, tasks, and resources. And here we've got a number of things that we can do. So if I just add a new one, I've got a number of options that I can have here. So I can have a blank text, I can have a user, so that will actually bring all C2 usernames as a drop-down list, a number, date and time, a link, text, dates, or I can create my own drop-down list here. So if you had users who weren't using C2 and weren't on a user list, you could create a drop-down of other users. And what this really helps to do is document against your processes information about the task itself. So that might be a link to the PDD or SDD documentation. It might go to whoever is the process owner, so that if there's a question, you know who to go to in the organization to ask things from. It might be a date when that task was uploaded, or the date when it's next to be reviewed. So you can build out these to be anything you want using these filters here, and these drop downs to have the option to what you want them to be. And then we can go, again, we can drop out to things, so we can go and see, well, in this, let's look at the technical lead one here. I'm going to drop out to this one here. I can see my workflows, and in these, I can see the labels that I've got here, but also this process owner item here. These are the users we've got in our C2 environment. This one here is going to be a link for documentation, so I could put in my link here to documentation. any information about my business unit in the text field here. And again, it's just ways of building out that information to say, well, here is my workflow or my task. What can I do with it? And the way to add these elements in is a little cog in your task or workflow to say, what do you want to have as part of this? So as you create these, they'll then become available here to say, do I want them enabled or disabled for this particular item? And we can build these out across whatever we want to do here. So whether we want to add labels and information there, or whether we want to add in these custom fields, we can choose what we have. So you can create as many of these as you want to, but then only have 2 or 3 for a particular workflow or task that you might have. And again, we can do this for tasks. So I can go into my task here, and I can go into the manage custom fields, and I can just come and switch some of these on and have that information then included in my task. So the idea here is really to make those fields available to you, to have more information, make that information more manageable and understandable by you. So rather than just being, well, here is the task name that you might have in your automation tool or wherever it happens to reside, gives you that context to understand what's going on, why it's there, who owns it, if it goes wrong, who to contact, just to have that insight and understanding into what's going on there. But if we now take a kind of look at where we're going over the next few months within C2, some of the ideas that are coming close to product reality now. So within this one, we've been looking at Microsoft and greater integration into Microsoft. So we've started working with Power Automate cloud flows, but we've got a focus looking at the desktop flows as well to see kind of greater integration into those ones, as well as information in the Dataverse. So really having a kind of much greater integration with the whole Microsoft ecosystem so that we can do a lot more with that environment, because I think everyone has got some degree of interest in what Microsoft are doing in this space. So we have people who are very advanced in that, who are actually starting to build automations and systems within that, through to others who are kind of viewing it with a little bit of suspicion and kind of very, very gently going into it. But it's getting bigger and bigger. So it's understanding what we can do within that whole Microsoft ecosystem to provide more information and insights, control, and importantly, governance, because certainly with a lot of those platforms now, governance is a weak spot at the moment, and being able to provide that kind of overall kind of structure to be able to say, well, we can use these tools, and here is a structured enterprise level orchestration and understanding of those platforms. We're looking at those optimization agents, so it's really bringing in more of those tiles to be able to say, well, this is a way you potentially might be able to improve your throughput, improve your efficiency, and just get better results out of your investments in your automation tools. So it's very much kind of focused on where we can, rather than manually kind of saying, well, where do we put the spanner here to try and tighten this up to make it better, actually having those suggestions automatically generated for you, rather than having to pour through lots of data to try and say, well, now how can we make that better? Where can we do it? C2 will automatically gather that information together and come up with those suggestions, pinpoint where you might want to implement those, and give you kind of solutions to be able to do that. Multi-time zone support. I think some would probably say it's long overdue, but we're close to this now. And what we're actually, the design and structure of this is, rather than just saying, well, you know, we'll be able to have working on a single time zone moving around, is actually to have the ability to go and say, well, these are my working hours, but I want these work. So my working hours might be from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. But for this specific task, I want 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. to be on Brazil time, or I want 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. to be on Sydney, Australia time. So you can use that same working hours and then decide which time zone. Same with if you're triggering a task at 10 a.m. in the morning, say, well, I'm going to trigger it at 10 a.m., but I want that to be on Berlin time rather than kind of London, UK time. And have that flexibility built into the system to be able to say, well, this is the time I want it to work, when I want it to trigger, all of those controls, but to have to be able to say, have that granularity to be able to say, this task, these configuration details, these are the the time zones I want to use for that. The next one we've got is around multi-platform support. So we are looking to expand much more into what we work with. So as many of you know, we started off in the world of Blue Prism and expanded out to UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Power Automate, and it's expanding all the time. And we are very conscious, as I mentioned earlier, that whatever is the tool of the moment today, in 6 months' time, there's going to be something else. Different people will be using different tools for different jobs in their organizations. So it's providing that flexibility to be able to say, well, let's use webhooks into an application so that when something happens in ServiceNow or SAP, we don't need to have kind of individual integrations. We have something that will integrate universally with those platforms to be able to say, here is an event. When that event happens, we want C2 to generate a queue item or trigger a task on a platform to be able to provide that ability for a greater automation of a business process. So going from start to finish, rather than just being just the RPA component of it, being able to say, this is the process flowing from start to end. And again, that really comes from our universal queue. So having that queue system that's independent of a technology. So we don't care what that technology is. It could generate a queue item, work a queue item, and pass it on to the next technology in the pipeline. So somewhere the traditional RPA tool might be in there. It may not be. It could be humans working with it. It's whatever you want. And that API-driven universal queue is there so that you can have multiple technologies taking a queue item, changing its queue item state, tagging it, all those good things that you're used to with queues within the automation kind of RPA space, but opening it out to a much wider range of technologies that we have. And finally on here, we're doing quite a lot of work around the reporting and dashboards. So at the moment, if you're using our dashboards, there's a kind of a large number of widgets within C2. And a lot of those have come from people suggesting, wouldn't it be nice to have this, or wouldn't it be nice to have that? What we're looking to do now is to really enhance the flexibility. So it may be that we have less overall widgets, but we've got the ability to do far more with them. So creating more of those widgets yourselves, being able to kind of adjust what you're reporting on, getting the information. It's always been our kind of view that we need to move away from the traditional, what was RPA reporting, into more of the kind of business reporting of understanding this is a process. What are we achieving for the business? So moving away from we had a success rate of 75%, and these are the business exceptions, system exceptions, whatever. We're looking at what has this done for the business? Has it brought in extra revenue? Has it deferred kind of costs from legal actions? All those good things to be able to say, well, what does it mean? So rather than just those RPA metrics that we probably all know and love, actually to go and say, well, what does it mean to the business? What's next? What's coming up? Why is it important to us? And what are the kind of key drivers for us using this technology in the first place? Thank you all very much for joining. Take care.